Now, as we recall in the beginning of the 5th book, Harry must go to a bullshit hearing at the Ministry of Magic because once again he uses magic outside of the school year, which is prohibited, in order to save Dudley from becoming fully demented. And surprise, surprise, when he arrives at the ministry with Arthur Weasley, he discovers that his hearing has been moved up in time and down to a completely different floor. Now, does this sound at all like how the Democratic Party was moving around all the voting locations and using their red tape, bureaucratic bullshit in order to prevent Bernie voters from voting? Harry's hearing is a complete shit show with the Minister of Magic Fudge trying at every turn to incriminate Harry. Dumbledore, however, proves Harry's innocence but is unable to look Harry in the eye throughout the entire hearing. This reminded me of Bernie's speech at the DNC when he told everyone that he backed Hillary. I think we all had the feeling that Bernie wasn't really looking any of us in the eye during that speech. But Dumbledore had to play by the Ministry of Magic's rules in order to continue fighting. This brings us to the idea of the Democratic Party as the Ministry of Magic, a body of government that once existed to do good, but has now been corrupted slowly and insidiously. We can even move away from the Democratic Party metaphor and look at the American government as a whole, as a representation of the corrupted Ministry of Magic. When Harry gets to school, he realizes that Umbridge has been appointed as the new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. The Sorting Hat performs a song that is out of character for it, in the way that it proceeds to give the school advice. It warns that the school must unite regardless of their houses. In the same way we, the people, must unite whether we are black or white, liberal or conservative, rich or poor, Republican or Democrat, Gryffindor or Slytherin. The so-called liberal media, our public education system, and societal structure that we are impervious to are constantly trying to pit us against each other simply by perpetuating the existence of these divides among us. They make us feel drastically different from one another. They make us feel that we could never understand what it is like to be on the other side. They show us images and story after story after story of us fighting against each other. This is the narrative they continue to convey to make us feel perpetually divided. In the end, we are all people. Better yet, we are all living things. Because I think the centaurs would take particular insult if they heard me calling them that. We are all guests on this earth, and we are behaving extremely impolitely. So, let's talk about propaganda. Let's talk about the liberal media. Let's talk about the Daily Prophet. Throughout the entire series, we observe the Daily Prophet as a propaganda machine. It exists to smear Harry and to make him look like a fool who cannot be believed. A windbag. Someone who always has something completely ridiculous, far-fetched, and ludicrous to say. The Daily Prophet exists to discredit Harry and Dumbledore and to give the illusion to the people who read the paper that Harry and Dumbledore are completely unhinged and dramatic. This is very much the way the liberal media has attempted to portray Bernie throughout the entire campaign. I'm talking about the New York Times, Time Magazine, ABC News, The New Yorker, CNN. From the beginning, they all set out to portray Bernie as a crackpot windbag who is too idealistic, too radical, and just simply couldn't be taken seriously. Let's talk about Umbridge. Can anybody guess who on God's green earth Dolores Umbridge may be? This is a quote that pertains to Umbridge. Harry felt a powerful rush of dislike that he could not explain to himself. All he knew was that he loathed everything about her, from her stupid voice to her fluffy pink cardigan. That's exactly how I feel about Hillary Clinton. I hate everything from her simpering smile to her hoarse, discordant man voice to her revolting, outdated women's suits. I actually find those pants and skirt suits to be highly offensive, both to my eyes and American fashion. In the first class with Professor Umbridge, she smugly informs the students that they won't actually be doing any magic this year in class. To which Harry argues angrily, "What good's theory going to be in the real world?" Umbridge replies, "This is a school, Mr. Potter, not the real world." "So we're not supposed to be prepared for what's waiting out there?" "There is nothing waiting out there, Mr. Potter." Umbridge says, "You have been informed that a certain dark wizard is at large once again. This is a lie." Harry says, "It is not a lie. I saw him. I fought him." And then Umbridge gives Harry detention. This is a good correlation to our government's manipulation of our public school system. Indeed, our schools have become not places of learning for children, but centers for brainwashing them. We are treated as numbers, given standardized tests, graded to make us feel that our worth can be determined on a number scale, and if our children don't fit in, we force them onto pills to make them fit. We force them to take Adderall, Ritalin, Strattera, Starting from extremely early ages, we turn them into the perfect robots that comply so well with our system. We turn them into robots that are highly addicted to drugs from before they hit puberty. It's no secret that all this shit is just legal speed. It's the same thing. The difference is the government can make a profit off of it, and it can be used to mold our kids into what we want them to be. Or what, rather, the government wants them to be. Adderall makes you feel like a number, and it makes you like being a number. In school growing up, little of what we learn can be applied to the real world. We feel peer pressure, a compulsion to fit in. That is so deeply ingrained into the experience of school in our country that it might be the single thing that people remember most about school. In school, we are not taught to use our intuition, to use it or learn from it. We are not taught to look at the bigger picture. We are not taught to put together all the details, our intuition, the facts, and every bit of knowledge that we have available to us in order to analyze, problem solve, make connections, and see patterns. We are not taught to think for ourselves. We are taught to believe whatever authority tells us to believe. We are taught to look at all the details instead of linking them together to look at the bigger picture. Like the ministry interfering at Hogwarts, the government through the school system, by failing to teach us to apply things, in Harry's case it's magic, but in our case it's our minds, is taking away our power and our right to function at our full potential, and in doing so, they are protecting themselves and inhibiting us. This is how you prevent people from seeing the truth and the consequential revolution and rebellion that may result from that. Because consciousness, like magic, can be the greatest weapon. And like witches and wizards were born to do magic, us human beings were meant to function at a level of higher consciousness, and we are being prevented from doing so. So we all know Harry tries to tell everyone, including his classmates, that you-know-who has returned, and no one believes him, because they all believe the Daily Prophet, which is telling them that Harry and Dumbledore are lying, and that you-know-who has not returned, when in fact we know, as readers, that he has. Gosh, I sure feel like I can empathize with Harry. I feel like Harry in that I'm just like, hello, fellow peers, there is evil afoot, Voldemort has returned. And everyone's like, yeah, well, the Daily Prophet didn't say so. Prove it. Good Morning America and the New York Times didn't say so. Harry, you think Voldemort has returned? Don't you know that's a widely accepted conspiracy theory? So now let's look at the chapter Detention with Dolores. First, we notice the overly wholesome image that Umbridge tries to portray. Just like the fluffy pink sweater Harry found positively revolting, he discovers her office to be the same way. The surfaces had all been draped in lacy covers and cloths. There were several vases full of dried flowers, each residing on its own doily, and on one of the walls was a collection of ornamental plates, each decorated with a large technicolor kitten wearing a different bow around its neck. These were so foul that Harry stared at them, transfixed, until Professor Umbridge spoke again. Good evening, Mr. Potter. The way Harry feels here reminds me of the same feeling I get when I see something that is masquerading under an overly patriotic, overly wholesome image in order to hide its inherent evil. That is how I feel listening to Hillary talk. That is what watching the Democratic Convention felt like. This is why I think some people gravitated towards Trump, although he is also obviously a liar and on the same side as Hillary. Basically, if you think Trump is a legitimate candidate at this point, and not just a distraction working for his friend Hillary, you seriously have had your brain slip out of one of your ears and ooze away from you in the opposite direction, while flipping you off but also sobbing quietly to itself. For all those people who have decided that it's time for them and their brains to go their separate ways, I think this could be because they feel like they have no other option. Since I'm not sure even half of America even knows there are such thing as third-party candidates, or who they are in this case. They are so deeply affronted by the nauseating show that Hillary's campaign has put on, though, that they are seeing Trump's apparent boldness and blatant vulgarity as an alternative to this. Possibly one of the most horrifying scenes in the Order of the Phoenix is when Harry's in detention and is forced to carve "I must not tell lies" over and over again into the back of his hand night after night. Now, I have read the bumper stickers that read, Hillary for President 2016, but even if we did manage to send Hillary to prison, I'm worried, like Umbridge said, that the message might not sink in. Perhaps, if we had her carve, I must not tell lies, into the flesh on the back of her hand repeatedly, this might get our point across. Or, on second thought, we could always get a tattoo artist to write, I must not cheat in elections, across her forehead for permanency's sake. Chapter 15, The Hogwarts High Inquisitor, is a perfect elaboration of the meddling of the corrupt government in the education system. In defense against the dark arts with Umbridge, Hermione offers her opinion against something she has read in the Umbridge-assigned book. Umbridge therefore deducts 5 points from Gryffindor and says, "I am here to teach you, using a ministry-approved method that does not include inviting students to give their opinions on matters which they understand very little." This parallels the way our political system is purposefully made so difficult to understand that there is such little information shared with the public that the establishment presses upon us this idea that we are ignorant and not entitled to an opinion, because we as civilians could never be up to the task of having one. Better leave all the thinking and decision-making to the government officials. It is the tactic of treating the class like they're stupid. This tactic is used to discredit the masses and convince us all that we must be too stupid to understand such things. I now view mainstream media as an insult to my intelligence. Sorry guys, but I stopped taking my fluoride pills 2 years ago. On page 325, we hear the first ever mention of the DA. Hermione proposes it to Harry and Ron, to which Ron says on page 325, "Come off it," groaned Ron. "You want us to do extra work? Do you realize Harry and I are behind on our homework again, and it's only the second week?" "But this is much more important than homework," says Hermione. Harry and Ron goggled at her. "I didn't think anything in the entire universe was more important than homework," said Ron. "Don't be silly, of course there is," said Hermione, and Harry saw with an ominous feeling that her face was suddenly alight with the kind of fervor that Spew usually inspired in her. "It's about preparing ourselves, like Harry said in Umbridge's first lesson, for what's waiting out there. It's about making sure we really can defend ourselves. If we don't learn anything for a whole year..." "We can't do much by ourselves," said Ron in a defeated voice. In the Hogshead, a huge group of people show up for the first ever DA meeting. This sort of symbolizes for me the first time you realize you are not alone, you are one of many. This was how I felt when the movement Occupy Wall Street emerged. For the first time in my life, I knew there were countless other people out there who knew that something was not right, and they were prepared to fight for it. The most important part of this chapter is when Hermione says, "We think the reason Umbridge doesn't want us trained in defense against the dark arts is that she's got some mad idea that Dumbledore could use the students in the school as some kind of private army. She thinks he'll mobilize us against the ministry." This is why the United States government doesn't want us to have guns, even though they are masquerading under the false pretense of protecting us. This is why we are not taught to use our full brains and function at our God-given potential in public schools. This is why information is never shared with us. By taking away our Second Amendment rights, they are taking away our right to protect ourselves, not from each other, but from them. By taking away our Second Amendment rights, they are taking away our ability to stand up to a corrupt government at any point in time. They throw pills and chemicals and diseases that literally make us dumber and lower our IQ, and this is how they take away our power, by deactivating our minds. They say they're doing this to keep us safe, but what they are really worried about is us mobilizing against them. It is too late though. Bernie has already mobilized us and in a sense created a sort of private army. Perhaps we should call ourselves Bernledore's army, which is actually kind of perfect, because we could call ourselves the BA, aka we're fucking badass.